Hey everybody, I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Hamilton Winters, coming to you over the airwaves here on the brand new Inneractions podcast. Now, over the last 7 weeks, we've been on YouTube as a video series. I've heard your feedback, and what we've done is, instead of watching us, now you're going to be able to listen to us. We're still going to be posting on YouTube, but we'll also be able to be found in Spotify and iTunes and the podcast app, among others as well. Today, we're excited to bring you, going along with the changes over to a podcast style, a brand new exclusive interview with a great friend of mine and my business partner, Russell Pizzuto. This is the new interview with Russell Pizzuto here. We hope you enjoy it. Today's topic is taking risks. All right, on this week's edition of Inneractions podcast, we have a special guest, our first guest on the podcast, Mr. Russell Pizzuto. Russell, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Hamilton?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Russell and I happen to be business partners, but more than business partners, we are great friends. And Russell, I want everybody to kind of get a brief explanation on how you and I are sitting in this room together putting this podcast out.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I guess to take us back to me graduating Georgia Tech, looking for where I wanted to go and not necessarily finding the right job for me, came to have an opportunity to get my private pilot's license, which at the time I thought was pretty cool. I didn't read too much into it in terms of goals for that or anything. I was just like, while I'm looking for an engineering job, I'll get my private pilot's license, and then that'll be another step in the, right direction, especially a resume thing. And that's all I was thinking about in the beginning. And then, I got into the flight school. I started flying. I started to see the environment a little bit more and understand a little bit more about what the environment is needing in terms of the future and how kind of immature, I guess, or it hasn't integrated necessarily technology into the business side of the lower level general aviation is what we're talking about yet. So obviously all these things are on the higher commercial level because they have the money to spend. But in the aviation industry, especially in the general aviation areas, everything's already so expensive that the money you have to spend on integrating technology into a company is, you don't even think about it really. You just assume that it'll be too expensive to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that coming, from Georgia Tech and having a technical background and then having the mechanical engineering theory behind it. I could, get my foot in the door, I guess you would say, in this world pretty easily, which I was able to, and then I was able to, I guess what I've always thought is the best way to do it would be to have as many mentors as you possibly can in all the areas that you want to learn about, right? So the owner of the flight school obviously was that first mentor. So, from there, the idea with him being my mentor was that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, which clearly he was. I heard from a lot of people that he was one of the best businessmen that they've ever seen. So, I kind of led into trying to find ways for him to, I guess, hire me. At first, I wasn't even worried about getting money. I was just kind of looking to hang out in the hangar and fix planes and learn about aviation while I had nothing to do and looking for jobs straight out of college, which won't go into that process, but it's not that fun.
I have a feeling that a lot of the listeners understand that.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
So I needed something fun to keep my mind fresh and not get kind of bogged down by not having a job and student loans that are, you have to start paying off in 6 months or something like that.
Something like that.
So, there's this time thing going on in my head. There's a lot of things at that time going on, and obviously probably swaying some of the decisions that I made during that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I figured I could push as hard as I can right now. I wouldn't be risking anything.
Yeah.
If nothing happened out of it, at least I go back to looking for an engineering job.
Exactly. You can always go back. And I tell people that, whether it's looking for a job or whether it's, leaving home for a while, you can always go back.
Yeah.
And there are arguments to be made that, certain people, your family, you only get to spend a certain amount of time with them. So, but at the end of the day, I can only speak to my experience, which has been phenomenal, to be able to move
off and to gain friends and contacts otherwise I wouldn't have the opportunity to do.
Absolutely.
And then if I wanted to move back, I always could. But this week, I think that you're the perfect guest to be able to talk about taking risks, because you and I are both taking a substantial risk with this new company that we're starting. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of fill them in on a little bit about what we're doing. And, now that we know where you've come from, what we're doing and kind of the vision that we have for our company.
Sure. So, as you know, it's called NSPIRE Aviation without the I in front of Inspire. And we can go into why that is later. But the goal behind it is to fill the need in the flight training industry, and that need is the need coming from the customers or the people who want to break into the industry and become a pilot or a mechanic or a line service technician. And those are the jobs that you get your foot in the door. It's kind of one of those three. You either want to become a pilot, want to become a mechanic, or want to become a line service technician. So what we're trying to provide for people is an easier route, right? An easier way to get their foot into the door of this industry, because once your foot's in the door, you can take it on your own and run with it in whatever direction that you feel passionate about. And if you have the ability and someone who kind of knows how to guide you through the beginning stages of the process, then you'll be way better off when you get to that point to be able to run by yourself, right? So you can just think of it like we're bringing people in and teaching them how to walk in the industry. And once they can walk, they'll start sort of jogging in the right direction, and they'll choose that direction. And once they start jogging in the right direction and they get some momentum behind them, and they have a couple mentors in the industry who they're constantly getting information from, they'll start running, and then they'll just start sprinting at a certain level, like I feel like I'm getting to now. You kind of sprint in all directions because you realize that with a solid foundation, you can kind of go in any direction you want to at that point. So
Yeah.
We try to provide an all-around general experience, keep it very basic. The stuff that we're outputting here at NSPIRE Aviation is not complicated. It's not complex. It's easy to understand, and it just gives you the basic knowledge so that when you feel the need or when you become passionate about one single thing or maybe two or three things in the industry, that you'll be able to just go ahead and run with it when you feel that spark of passion.
Mm-hmm. That makes total sense. And what we've talked about before is that you and I have kind of created this around what we wish would have been available when we were coming through.
Yeah.
An opportunity to go into a program or go into a system and not only be able to exhibit what your God-given gifts are, but to be able to be paired up with someone who is much more experienced and well-versed in the industry that you have found, or maybe you don't know yet is the industry that you want to go into.
Yeah.
And to be able to have the basic understanding to be, a high quality, safe, and professionally developed whatever you want to be. And I don't know if that's a pilot, I don't know if that's a businessman or what, but what you hit on, which is extremely important, and it's something that they don't necessarily teach you in school, is the mentor thing. Everybody knows that you need a mentor. But going back to the topic of risk, it seems like that's how you kind of hedged your risk. It seems like that's how you diversified your own portfolio. Is, I don't know anything about business. Let me go hook up with the best business guy ever and do some business with him. And I don't know anything about aviation, but I know something about mechanical engineering. It can't be that difficult, except for, if you're working on planes, you have wings. If you're working on cars, you got wheels. I mean, not to say that planes don't have wheels. Thank you. I'm glad that they do have wheels. I hope they always have wheels. But at the end of the day, it seems like that's kind of how you've hedged your risk.
Yeah, so going back to risk, I think you're exactly right. I think, obviously, in this industry alone, risk is everywhere, right? So I felt that with my background in mechanical engineering and learning how to minimize risk or knowing the formulas or, whatnot, I feel like I was geared towards that sort of job to be able to manage risk in this high stress environment where risk is in every decision you make, right? And yeah, I mean, I have a solid STEM background, and we've talked about before that I feel that aviation is, a higher iteration, if you will, of the STEM fields, right? So they all connect through aviation. We're all using the STEM pillars to, fly airplanes every single day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, and through the STEM education process, that's where you're going to learn how to mitigate risk, right? So for me, it was just the next step in what I've always sort of been doing. I've looked at risk in many ways in theory up to this point, and then entering in to be a pilot, you sort of start looking at risk a different way. It's no longer, okay, you're sitting down for hours calculating the risk in theory. It's a split-second decision that means life or death.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously risk becomes a higher priority in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
right, now than it was before. So you have to learn how to deal with that. I think a lot of people even get very anxious in the beginning when they're flying planes, especially when they don't know everything that's going on. So I think the best thing that helped me, again, to mitigate that risk was finding a mentor in every avenue of aviation so that I could learn everything or as much as I could, as fast as I could. So honestly, in a selfish way, I could just be more comfortable in the plane and dealing with the plane and not feel so hesitant to, do preventative maintenance even, or check things that you wouldn't normally hear about if you didn't have that mentor who,
Mm-hmm.
it's literally his job to make sure those things go right at a corporate level,
Yeah.
right? So you always want mentors that are way, way, way above your level,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I got the first mentor was obviously the owner of the flight school, and the flight school I've taken over all responsibilities
Yeah.
at this location, right? So over 3 years, I just shadowed. Well, not even 3 years. I think it was only about a year and a half. I shadowed him and learned his, ins and outs, everything he did, the good and the bad. And then I took the good and this,
Learn
thought of
from the bad.
ways that I could, avoid the bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and build a flight school that would be sustainable.
Yeah.
Right. And then now, taking the issues that I've seen in the flight school and coming up with a way that we can start to mitigate those issues, right? Because then if you're mitigating those issues, then that's where you would mitigate risk,
Mm-hmm.
right? Having a smooth process that everyone is aware of, I guess, is I would say, the easiest way to, or the best way, the most quality way to make sure you're being safe.
Yeah. A couple of points I wanted to make on what you just said. One, the mentor thing is fantastic. I see a lot of people that go and get mentors for what they're good at so that they can become the best at it. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is it might be more valuable to go get a lot of mentors in areas that you know that you're not as strong in.
Yeah.
So having a financial mentor, having a business mentor, having a spiritual mentor, having, whatever type of mentor that you know that you could be better in and maybe are lacking in is extremely important.
Exactly.
Two, have you had any quote unquote formal mentors? Because it seems like we have this idea in our mind that, we have a mentor and a mentee, and, it's just going to pair up, and then you're going to be like, hey, you're my mentor, and hey, you're the guy I'm mentoring or the girl I'm mentoring. Well, it seems like most of the mentors that I have in my life, I didn't even know they were my mentor until I had been mentored for quite some time.
And you know me, I wouldn't use that word, except for right now we're trying to explain the relationship
Exactly.
to people who, aren't involved in this world. But I would say the best mentor you can ever have is your best friend.
Exactly.
So, you don't develop the relationship as a mentor-mentee relationship. You develop the relationship to become best friends with that person.
Yep.
And then your habits, your habits will form by idolizing in a respectable way that person, right? Not putting them on a pedestal and idolizing them, but idolizing them in the sense that every time they speak to you, you're listening to gain knowledge in the area that you want to cultivate in your life that they're bringing to you, because you know that they're the highest person that can give you that knowledge, right? So, I mean, that's all I guess. It's a very simple way to try to describe the relationships I'm really talking about. Because yeah, you're right. It's not a formal.
And it seems almost when we use that term transactional, like, you know, somebody's giving and someone is receiving, and I don't feel like that. And it seems like the people in my life who I would describe as mentors feel differently than that transactional. They feel as though I'm coming to give them something. They are coming to give me something, and then it doesn't feel like it's a transaction at all.
Yeah.
Both parties are mutually benefited.
That's why I guess the friendship word is better, because that's what happens when you're best friends with someone. You're there because you're both taking something from the other person, and not in a selfish way. It's like a contract. It's like you both agreed to that.
Exactly.
You're vulnerable and allowing this person to learn from your, experience, right? So my mentors right now and all the areas I have at least 20 to 30 years of experience in the industry and what they're doing. So I look at that and, just what's the most efficient and effective way to use your time if you're trying to learn something. And I think that's the main reason I've been able to take on so much new information in the last even 3 years. And now when I describe to people what my job is, they I can't even explain it in enough sentences to fill the time, It's like, I like the phrase, I wear a lot of hats. I've been hearing that from other people lately, but I guess that sums it up,
I totally understand that. One thing that you hit on was your experience in the industry from 2 or 3 years. And it seems as though, and I know in your case, but necessarily in other people's case, they look for a problem to solve and then they try to put a solution behind it. It seems to me like you found a solution and then you started looking and seeing problems that solution could apply to.
I guess so. Yeah, if you want to break it down that way. Again, we have to use language because we're trying to talk to other people to get them to understand what we know as well, but obviously, we don't think about it that way. I would never think that I have a solution.
Yeah. Well, an approach.
A
process. Or a process.
I think I have a good process. But that's what I was trained to create, right? Engineering systems and processes, right? That's
But something that's interchangeable. And I think that's what you and I have been talking about within the last couple of weeks. I mean, we're podcasting out of our own studio. Well, the same process that we use to build our business in aviation, we use to create the studio and to produce videos and podcasts and music, and we can pick it up and, break it down and move it to whatever's next.
Yeah.
And if it works once, who's to say that it won't work again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you're not rigid about what it looks like.
Yeah. Flexibility. And that's what another thing that you said, which was fun equals fresh. You used the word fun.
And
then you said that. Yeah. I'm always taking notes, dude. Fun equals fresh. So if you're having fun, everything kind of stays fresh. And I don't know if you feel this way. I hope that you don't, but I know I don't. I can work more here and feel like I worked less than anywhere in the world. Or I can go somewhere else and do a little bit of work, and I'm like, oh, I just want to work on the stuff that I want to work on.
Yeah.
And then it's not so taxing.
Yeah, it's your perspective, like we talk about.
Yeah.
A lot.
Not
to get too deep, but you could look at the same white wall, and every time you looked at it, you could see something different. It's just, it comes out of your head.
Yeah. I can't help you on that one.
What do you want the white wall to look like?
Exactly.
I mean, that's how I think about creating anything. So, when you think about that, and when you try to answer that question enough time, or you ask that question to yourself enough time, and then you start actually building real things using how you answered that question, it starts to kind of look like you start to develop a process that you think is good.
Yeah.
And then when you test it over multiple mediums, then you can start refining that process to come up with a more universal process that works for, multiple avenues.
Yeah. And another thing you mentioned was that your mentors, lack of a better term, all have 20 to 30 years experience. And one of the things that I was thinking about when you said that is, who's to say that you don't have 20 or 30 years experience by association? Everybody, tends to think that you have to go work in an industry for 20 or 30 years to have that experience. Well, if I look at someone who's been through some, terrible loss, I don't have to lose a direct family member to understand what that feels like if I empathize for them.
Sure.
Therefore, I've had that experience by association. You did the same thing, but instead of something that you lost, it's something that you gained. You might be, how old are you?
27.
Okay, 27. You might have more experience in the airline industry, in the aviation industry, than you have been years alive, simply because you've placed yourself in that position. Agree?
Yeah.
Which I've never thought about it that way. But think about that. You are the cumulative experience of all of the people who are willing to share that experience with you. So if it's a 90-year-old who had experience in World War II, did you or did you not have some semblance of that experience?
Yeah, and if you're really taking it another iteration back from my mentors, then they had
Exactly.
their mentors were the 90-year-olds from the World Wars, right? So yeah, I mean, that's the same for music. That's the same for anything that we would ever create. We're just drawing on what people have already inputted into that space that we're entering in to try to create something. So everything can be new and everything can be old at the same time.
But it's the accumulation of all that experience.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. I mean, anybody that doesn't think that this is the best time to be alive, I can't help you because there's no other time that you would be alive. I think this is the best time in the world to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
So use the...
I hope that's what you think if you're alive.
Exactly. You can't get it back. So good luck. I mean, unless Amazon creates a time machine, which I have no doubt.
I mean, you could be right. You could be wrong, but that's not the point.
Yeah. It's like you said, the white wall. It's all about the perspective. It's all about what you want to see.
Yeah.
My world's a lot better place if I just try to use the tools and resources that were given to me, because this is the only time that I'm here.
And that way, I mean, we're not ignoring the bad things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yep.
There's a difference between, truth and truth, I guess. It's like, or facts and truth, I should say. Like there's facts. Like, yeah, there are plenty of people in the world. Like we are in the 1% if you look at the globe, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, yeah, we have a pretty awesome life. I mean, you can just expand it out into a bigger perspective and you see something different. Like you come up with a different conclusion. So
exactly.
If you have the freedom to do that, why wouldn't you come up with the best conclusion you could ever come up with? Like why settle for a limited worldview and a limited solution?
Yeah.
If you're thinking about America and you're like, well, I only make like 30 grand a year, I'm like well far away from the 1% of America, then you're going to have a pretty horrible day and a pretty horrible life if you tell yourself that every day.
Absolutely.
If you look at it in terms of the world, then you're like,
I'm having a pretty good day.
Yeah, there's a lot worse days out there than mine.
Yeah, I agree completely.
In your perspective, of course. But they might not think that their day's that bad anyway. So who are you to place your perspective on someone else's life,
Yep. And I've always said that kindness has the power to either allow someone's good day to become better or to change someone's bad day into a good one. With that being said, there's only so much I can do from the outside to change your perspective. I can't change the way that you think. I can help you to approach something that you've been thinking about in a certain way until this point in a different way. But I can't change your mind necessarily. You have to change your own mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, from that, I would say, what's your purpose with this Inneractions podcast? Because I would say that that's close to the idea around it. I mean, I don't want to tell you what your idea is, but
no. From
my perspective, when you were starting to make the beginning videos and telling me about the idea, and even the name itself, it comes from the way to do it is to allow these things, these interactions to come out and to talk about them in an open way. And then, therefore, that person receiving that information, you're not directly talking to them, so they don't feel like you're the one placing this task upon them that they have to complete in order to have a good life, right? It's their secondary watching this video saying, well, that guy seems pretty happy.
I could implement that.
Well, and it goes back to learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way to learn? I've always learned from imitation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So naturally people will just, when they see a happy person, they want to imitate that person,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the way I learn from my mentors is just imitating what they do. It's so you can copy that process 1,000 times
Yep.
and do it, learn whatever you want at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of sitting down with a stack of books and trying to gain knowledge from a stack of books, you could watch how the expert does it and then copy him, and then through his process, that's how you'll learn the details of what's really going on.
Yep.
Because you need the experience to understand what's really going on. Well, why is the process read 1,000 books and then go out and try to do the experience?
Exactly.
It's like I would rather try to watch someone doing the experience and then read 1,000 books about it, because then I'll be into the 1,000 books. I'll be like, oh, now I get why he did that before that.
Exactly.
So it's interesting. Yeah.
No, you hit the nail on the head. Exactly what I'm trying to do with this thing, and I think that we've succeeded in thus far, which is to provide a platform now for others to share. At first, it was for just me to start it up and to provide myself a platform to get these messages out and to kind of start the momentum. Now it's a platform to provide you and others an opportunity to share your experience, which, the listeners and I can imitate and emulate, which I think that word imitation, we look at it, and the first thing that pops in my mind is flavorings, right? We used to make rock candy. We still do at my grandmother's house over Christmas. And we have all these imitation flavors, which the word imitation, we kind of give the connotation of fake, right? If you have an imitation of something, you have the real thing. The imitation is the fake or artificial version. And it doesn't have to be that way. You could be just as real in imitating that person, but create your own style, and that's how you emulate what they're doing. But going back to what you were saying about, the experiences that the people that have the interactions and come on the show, the second part of providing the platform is to provoke thought, and to provoke a conversation, right? Because when you walk in this building, I get some of your experience, and you get a little bit of mine too. I don't want to talk a lot. This is for you. But the next week, when we have another guest, we get some of his or her experience, and the next week, until the show has provided listeners as much or as little experience from an outside world that they're not a part of as possible, all on the basis of making the world better.
And then you've created a space where engagement is your means of translation, I guess you would say, or how much you get out of that space is how much you engage in it.
Yep. You get in what you get out what you put in.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. And I think that's another place that we have found ourselves throughout this building the company is...
I was going to tie it right into our business.
Go ahead.
Like now that people understand interactions, right? It's easy to now go back to NSPIRE Aviation, something that they don't have any direct relationship to, right? So the reason we're providing mentors for people is that exact reason. Well, we just think it's better to learn by watching someone that's way more experienced in the area that you're trying to learn about right now.
Yeah.
Not sitting down and telling people to go home and use an online program and read some books and then come back to us when they make a 90% on the exam.
Yeah. Which is what you and I did, but we don't recommend it.
But did my voice get a little anxious?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even thinking about it was like, what a horrible way to do it. Like, how much stress was on you? Like, if you look back on trying to study for that information, like how much stress
it's like pulling teeth
was on your life. Yeah. I mean, it's like, you had to convince yourself to sit down and like copy information just so that you could memorize it.
Yep.
And then you lost it when you took the test. It was like, what? There's got to be a better way, right? I don't know.
It was like going back to school.
I guess that's how I've always thought about it. But
exactly. And I think that we found a better way, but it wasn't anything that we created, right? None of the information that we're putting out there is organic. It comes from a source. We just make it understandable. None of the mentors or anybody that we're creating, they're already there. None of the students or anybody that we're creating, they've come to us and said, we have an interest in learning about an industry that, one, looks like a lot of fun, and it is, by the way.
Yes,
2,
it is.
it looks, what's the word? Challenging, and it looks exciting, and that those are both true as well.
Yeah.
And 3, something that I can either do on the weekends or I can turn into a career. Perfect. Well, let's kind of merge all 3: the knowledge, the experience, and the student.
Yeah.
The eager student willing to learn. And if you create that environment, like you and I always talk about, you don't have to go and try to do a lot of work, and that's where people stress themselves out. Is I got so much work to do. I got to go sit at a desk and churn it out. Well, why don't you just work on creating an environment that's conducive of your creativity, and then the work, 1, gets done probably quicker and of higher quality than otherwise would have been, and 2, you don't feel like you're working.
Yeah.
You ever get burned out on something you want to do?
Probably not.
Yeah. It's just too much fun.
Yeah.
So any information that you have that you keep to yourself, no one else benefits from.
True.
Any of the information that I have that I keep to myself, no one else benefits from. So this is an open source, open source positivity, open source energy, open source education. And that has been our prerogative from the very beginning.
Yeah, and to try to do it in as many different ways as we can.
Exactly.
Because we don't want to reach just one avenue
Mhm.
of people. Just like teaching, you don't want to just teach to one group of learners.
Exactly.
You want to teach to the whole group of learners, and the whole group of learners learns in a whole range of different ways.
Mm-hmm. And some want to take it to the next step, and some say, that's it. I got what I needed.
And either way is fine.
It's perfectly
Completely
fine.
Yeah.
But the cream rises to the top, right? And then the 3 or 4 in the classroom of 20 that say, oh, you spoke directly to me. This is all I've ever wanted to do. Okay, well, cool. Let's integrate you into our system, make you the best, whatever that is, best aviator that we can possibly make you.
Yeah.
But I think this whole thing goes back to, this is how we've found to diversify and to hedge our own risk. Is we're not working for some company pushing the clock every day, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not for us.
Mm-hmm.
So was it riskier for us to go and do something like that everyone else would consider to be less risky? Or would it be less risky for us to do what everyone else would be considered as risky, which is, hey, look, you're both under 30, go start your own company, don't make an income for a while and hope that it works. Throw spaghetti at the wall. To us, that was the less risky option. And you can extend upon that.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about risk, but in terms of defining risk, who defines what risk is? I think if you take the consensus of the general population on what risk is, then you're going to make those decisions based on what you think the general population thinks is risky.
Mm-hmm.
I took a different approach, I guess. I don't normally, I guess I would say most of my decisions don't necessarily follow the general perspective of the population. But then again, that's just my perspective on what the general perspective of the population is in the first place. So it's a trap.
Yeah.
When you start thinking about it, it's like, well, where is the risk? Can you really pinpoint where the risk is, or are you constantly making decisions on an idea that has been defined by somebody else? Which at that point, I wouldn't say that you're directing your own life, which would be the point of these conversations, is to figure out how to be the director of your decisions and the director of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, coming into this environment, it forces you to ask yourself those risky questions all the time. And you get better at answering them, right? You get closer to zero, if you will, right? And defining the what risk is to you, right? And then as you tackle these walls, as you tackle these fears in your mind of what you thought the risk was, you only get better at tackling those walls. And it's like, well, now I'm not afraid of flying at all, and now I'm not afraid of working on planes, and now I'm not afraid of managing 50 to 100 people. Is that risky in other people's minds? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 of those things individually is probably a huge risk, and other people's minds. But in my mind right now, since I went through the step-by-step process to be able to make sure that physically, emotionally, psychologically, I could handle those times when I took on those responsibilities, then your perspective of risk elevates as you go up. Mm-hmm. So you stay in your bubble of risk, if you want to call it. But as you move up through the risky things, the risk redefines itself, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think for people who are struggling with that concept, you know, should they work for themselves? Should they try to find a job out of college? I mean, can't speak to what the individual could do, but I can say that the way I thought about it was just as risky for me to have to spend 2 years in an entry-level position that psychologically I already knew that I wouldn't necessarily benefit from. Mm-hmm. And it just boiled down to the only reason I would be taking that would honestly be for the resume builder, mm-hmm. if you and for me, understanding, I think, and understanding, what knowledge, is, where it comes from, how to gain experience, how to have those things. I thought that, honestly, if I could find my own mentors, it'd be better than going in a corporation that sets you up with mentors that have mm-hmm. to be there and are getting paid to be your mentor, and that they actually call mentors, right? Yeah. Those aren't your best friends, right? They're far from your best friends. Yes. You probably talk a lot of crap about that person when you're not with that person, yeah. right? And they probably talk a lot of crap about you, but it's not because, you're a bad person, they're a bad person, but in their eyes, it's the name of the game. Yeah. So I chose a different game, I guess. Mm-hmm. There's risk in this game too. Yeah. But it's a game that I felt more equipped to play, mm-hmm. right? I felt that I had the tools to play this risky game more than I even had the tools to go into a corporate environment, right? Mm-hmm. So in my perspective, going into a corporate environment was way more of a risk because I didn't have the social skills built up yet to be able to be successful in that environment and to be able to make my time efficient and effective. Mm-hmm. I did have the skills, however, to go into this environment already and have a high level of understanding to be able to position myself into a position to where I could start understanding things better. And when you understand something, then the risk starts to fall away. What we call risk, whatever that idea, mm-hmm. however you define risk, because it's up to you.
To put it in more even a layman's example, if you're 6'4" and stick thin, maybe football isn't the best game for you.
Like me?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how tall are you?
6'3".
Yeah. So, like you. But maybe, I don't know, tennis, baseball,
basketball, and cross country were good for me.
But two things. One, maybe all your parents want you to do is play football. Does that sway your decision?
Absolutely, sure.
And two, is baseball your passion? Because maybe football is your passion. You can go, see if you can fit in, or you can play the game that you have the best tools for. And it's another funny exercise to say, hey, look, I could have been the best NHL hockey player in the history of the world, but I grew up in Louisiana. Yeah. Who knows? You could have been the best whatever it is in the world, but you'll never know because you didn't have the opportunity to use those gifts or those, tools when it was given. But you were able to use the gifts and tools you were given in the environment that you had. So when you lay out your options of what's available to me, trying to pair up what gifts or tools that you have with the best opportunity to use them, I think is what we're talking about.
Yeah. And it's not a quick thing, right? It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it took me years to get to this position, right? Yeah. But it's just, I guess, just knowing in your mind where you want to go, first of all, and like having some idea of it at least. I mean, it doesn't even have to be that clear. You just be like, hey, I think that's cool.
Did you ever find it funny, like I did, that parents will put their kids in literally any after school activity? Yeah. Let's put them in horse riding, or let's put them in guitar lessons, and so was I. Yeah. And it's funny because it was great experience, but it was almost like, I want to find the one thing that my child is literally the best at. Yeah. And if they take a liking to it, like, go. It's not a bad process, but maybe ask your kid
Maybe,
what they want to do.
but that's from a perspective of a singular perspective, I would say. I think, when you have a chance to talk to your parents about the decisions that they made for you, they may give you a different perspective. Like, I know mine was more of a holistic approach, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't, we're trying to find the exact thing that you're the best at. It was, we want you to be a well-rounded person. We don't care if you're a superstar.
Yep.
Right? So if your goal is to be a superstar, then stick to one thing and be the best at it. If your goal is to be a well-rounded person, then try a bunch of things and try to get really good at a bunch of things.
Yeah. Which I 100% recommend.
Yeah, I would. I mean, obviously we chose the bunch of things route.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's because we were never focused on trying to prove ourselves in one area. We rather saw I guess if you want to call it a deeper meaning to what we were doing, to where if we could develop an underlining process that was more universal to many things that would help people become better quicker at these things, then that would be our goal, right? That would be, in my mind, then I'm a superstar.
Yeah.
Right? Not because I spent all my time trying to learn one thing and became very good at that one thing, but because I can do a lot of things in a very short amount of time.
And you can talk about them, right?
Yeah.
Because just like what we're doing, aviation, entrepreneurship, engineering, like a lot of those categories, I would not have the lingo, I would not have the confidence or the information I needed to be able to talk about those things, right? To talk about them credibly. But now it seems like what we've done is taken this risk, quote unquote, to go out, learn about these experiences by experiencing them. And now we have people that come up to us and their reaction is, oh man, you guys, I wish I could go back to being 27 and 23, start my own company and learning about this stuff. You can't go back once you're my age, but I can, hang on to you guys and try to, guide you through this storm that I know is coming, because this is what's coming up.
Yeah, and not to say we're inventing a new process. I don't want to think people were sitting in here like whiteboarding ideas and coming up with this universal process or anything, but it's just based off of the scientific process and the method of trying to get closer to, really what it is, or really what you're doing, or really whatever. And it's interesting. I mean, especially this time in the world, there's a lot of new ideas coming out that are more credible, I guess you would say, which leads to more options for people to believe in, I guess.
Yeah.
But I always tried to just focus on what's right in front of me and not necessarily focus too much on, reading into what other people feel about my situation or what I'm doing, right? So I just tried to identify what works for me, what tools do I have in my garage, and what can I make out of it. Start there and,
drop the need to justify what you're doing.
Yeah, the first table is going to look like crap.
Yeah.
It's, maybe not. Maybe you're a natural, right? But then you'll know after you made your first table. You're like, wow, I'm really good at this.
Yeah.
And then you're going to start making more tables, and then you're going to make other things, So why think that it has to be any other way besides that when you enter into a new area? Like, I've seen a lot of people get so super excited about coming for flight training and lose that excitement so quickly. And I'm just like, why?
Yeah. And I think that's a fantastic closing point, which is, is it riskier to go out and try something that you've never tried before and maybe look like a fool? Or is it riskier to never try that and you could have been the best at what you were going to do? Or even, not even the best, but it's something that you could find enjoyment in.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I never thought about it that way, but that reminds me of like an opportunity cost situation.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, so that I feel like, I probably because my dad, trained me to think this way by, always making me think about, what's your opportunity cost, in this situation. That's going to tell you whether it's worth it or not, right? But when you think about opportunity cost, that's how I think about it. You have opportunities. You have multiple opportunities. Every single day you have the opportunity to do so many things, right? So how do you get really good at calculating that opportunity cost to where you don't even have to spend any more time calculating it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, experience. You get better at calculating that. So you wake up every day and you think about it. And every situation that you come up with, you try to have a set plan for calculating that opportunity cost. And it's going to take you, a long time in the beginning to get used to calculating that. But every time you do it, repetition rules. It's like you'll just get faster and faster and faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll look back in 3 months and you're like, well, that didn't take that long. It's like, well, yeah, because you did it.
Exactly. I think that's key.
Yeah.
That is a perfect point.
I think that's the approach everyone should take, and that's the approach I feel like that I've taken to get my foot in the door in aviation. The thing that I wanted to do, well, that was creepy.
What's that?
Some person just peeked in and they had sunglasses on and a trench coat.
Oh, weird.
I gave him the peace sign and they pieced back and then
Nice.
walked away. Anyways, I totally lost my train of thought there.
That's okay.
That was like a horror movie, honestly.
There's a dark
It
hallway.
shocked me.
Wow.
Holy crap. I don't even know what I was talking about.
It's okay. Well, as we kind of close this thing down, just wanted to thank you for being the first guest on the podcast. This will not be the last time that you hear the voice of Russell Pizzuto on Inneractions. Also, if you enjoyed hearing the two of us on the podcast together, we're going to have another aviation podcast coming out very soon. Some more details to come on that. But is there anything else that you wanted to add for you?
Obviously, thanks for having me. I think this is going to be a great way for us to grow personally and as well to interact with, other people who are interested in the same things that we're interested in, or at least, they're interested in growing themselves.
Or could become interested in something that we're interested in.
Yeah, or could, yeah. I think growth, if they're interested in growth, that's what we're interested in.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter what area it is. What we do is specifically we work in aviation, but we feel like aviation is the place that connects all of these other things. So that's, I think, why we necessarily kind of are more attracted to being in the aviation space than anywhere else. We can reach more people, right?
Exactly. And how can they reach you? Social media, email, anything like that? If you have any questions for Russell, comments?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, our business that we're creating is called NSPIRE Aviation without the I in Inspire. So my email is russell@inspireaviation.com. Instagram, Aviator Russ. Other than that, I'm not too active on social media, but
we all respect you for that.
Yeah, I'll hold the structure together for us.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
But no, happy to talk to anybody who has questions. And, I obviously, since I had people help me get to where I am very quickly, I'm looking to do the same thing for other people, however they, whatever that means to them.
Exactly. Hit the nail on the head. If you have, any listeners have some suggestions for future shows, any guests that we can bring on, any more Russell Pizzutos that we can have on the show to share their experience. And if you have any ideas for sponsorships as well, as we get this thing started up and for the airwaves as well, bring on more viewers and be able to offer them some value within the podcast with some sponsorships, please reach out to us. And you can find me on Instagram at Hamilton Winters. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the show today. Thank you, Russell. Again, fantastic show. I hope this provided some value to you, and that your interaction today would be to use your gifts in a way that you can mitigate your own risk by finding where you belong.
Absolutely. And, thank you for what you're doing. And I'm sure people are going to love this podcast or whatever.
Yeah, man, I'm
this
excited.
Evolves into.
I'm excited.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that exclusive interview with Russell Pizzuto on episode 8 of Inneractions. Make sure to check back in with us each Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. We'll have a new episode for you. Until then, go love on somebody today. We look forward to having you next time. Have a good one, folks.